Please don't kick me. I'm already hurt, cried the waitress. Then the undercover CEO did something no one expected. What if a single act of cruelty could spark the most beautiful transformation in someone's life? Julia pressed her back against the cold brick wall behind Tony's diner. Her uniform was still damp from the coffee a customer had just spilled on her, deliberately. At 34, she'd grown used to invisible bruises, the kind that come from exhaustion and silent humiliation. Working 3 jobs to feed her 8-year-old son had left her stronger, but not unbreakable. Her hands trembled as she wiped away tears, not from the burns on her arm, but from the man's final words. Maybe if you weren't so clumsy, you wouldn't be stuck serving people like me. Inside the diner, a man in faded jeans and a simple button-down shirt had seen everything. David Chen, worth more than most small countries, sat quietly in the corner booth, his coffee untouched. What he'd just witnessed made his chest tighten with something he hadn't felt in years. Julia had been working at Tony's diner for 8 months, ever since the car parts factory where she'd spent 6 years shut down. The job barely covered rent for the tiny apartment she shared with her son, but it was honest work. She took pride in it, finding dignity in every cup refilled and every plate cleared. Most customers were kind, tired truckers, sweet elderly couples. But lately, there had been more like Frank, a regular who seemed to take pleasure in reminding her of her place. He spilled drinks on purpose, mocked her, and always left exact change, never a tip. David had been coming to Tony's for 3 weeks, always ordering black coffee and whatever pie was fresh. He dressed plainly, drove an old pickup truck, and spoke softly. Julia had assumed he was a mechanic or contractor, someone who understood hard work. She'd noticed the calluses on his hands, the quiet politeness in his voice, the way he always said please and thank you. What she didn't know was that David Chen was the CEO of Chen Industries, a company known for reviving struggling businesses. For months, he'd been visiting small diners like this, disguised as an ordinary customer, to learn what no spreadsheet could ever tell him, how people treated one another when no one important was watching. That night, when Julia stepped back inside trying to compose herself, Frank was already waving his cup impatiently. "Hurry up! And try not to spill it this time." The few customers in the diner shifted uncomfortably, but no one said a word. That's when David quietly stood from his corner booth. His decision was made. He walked toward Frank's table, calm but firm. Julia approached at the same moment, coffee pot trembling in her hands. "What do you want?" Frank snapped. "I'm trying to get some service here." David's voice was low but carried through the entire diner. "I've been watching you," he said. "For weeks, I've seen how you treat this woman, with complete disrespect." There was no anger in his tone, only a quiet authority that silenced every whisper. "Mind your own business," Frank sneered. "If she can't handle the job, she shouldn't be here." Julia stood frozen, tears threatening again. She needed this job desperately. The rent, the overdue school lunch money, the electric bill, she couldn't afford to lose a shift. As she began to pour his coffee, David gently placed his hand over the cup. "No," he said softly. "Julia, you don't have to serve someone who treats you like you're less than human." He turned to Frank. "Every person in this diner has a story, people who love them, dreams they're chasing, battles they fight silently. The difference is, most of us don't use our pain as an excuse to hurt others." Frank stood abruptly, his chair screeching. "Who the hell do you think you are? Some blue-collar nobody?" David's eyes never wavered. "Maybe, but I know the difference between a man and a bully." He pulled out his wallet and placed a $100 bill on the table. "Your meals are covered for the next month, but here's the deal. You'll treat every worker here with respect, or you'll find another place to eat." The diner went dead silent. Julia's tears returned, but this time, they came from gratitude, not humiliation. Frank muttered something under his breath, threw a few bills on the table, and stormed out. No one stopped him. When the tension finally broke, Julia's hands were still trembling. She set down the coffee pot carefully and turned to David. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I could have handled it." "I know you could have," David said gently. "You've been handling it for weeks. But just because you can endure something doesn't mean you should have to." He nodded toward his booth. "Can we talk?" Tony, behind the counter, gave her a small nod of approval. She followed David back to his seat. "I'm David," he said, extending his hand. "And I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For sitting here for 3 weeks watching that man disrespect you and not saying anything until tonight." His voice held genuine regret. "I've been coming here to understand this place better. I'm in the restaurant business, and I was considering buying Tony's diner." Julia's stomach dropped. Another corporate buyer. Another job lost. "Oh," she murmured. "But," David continued, "what I've learned here isn't in any business plan. I've watched you cover shifts, help your coworkers, treat every customer with kindness, even when they didn't deserve it." Julia frowned. "How do you know about my struggles?" "Because I recognize them," David said softly. "I grew up watching my mother work 3 jobs, just like you. I know that look, the exhaustion, the quiet pride, the fear of falling behind." He paused. "Julia, you've already proven everything you need to prove. Watching you work has taught me more about leadership and dignity than any business school ever could." Julia blinked. "I don't understand." "What do you mean you're in the restaurant business?" David handed her a business card. "David Chen, CEO, Chen Industries." Her eyes widened. "You're—" "Someone who believes the best businesses are built on treating people right," he interrupted. "And you've shown me exactly what that looks like. Julia, I want to buy this diner, but only if you'll help me run it. I want to turn it into a place that truly serves the community." "I don't know anything about running a business," Julia stammered. David smiled. "You know everything that matters. You know how to make people feel seen. You care. That's the foundation of any great business." He leaned closer. "I'm offering you a partnership, Julia. Not just a job, a real stake in what we'll build together." She felt her world tilt. "I can't. I have my son and—" "Exactly," David said. "He's the reason this can work. We'll build a place where families like yours can thrive, fair wages, health care, college funds for employees' children." He smiled softly. "I've been searching for someone who knows what it means to build something real. Watching you work, I found that person." Tears streamed down Julia's cheeks, this time tears of hope. "Why me?" she whispered. "You could choose anyone." "Anyone can manage numbers," David said, "but not everyone leads with heart." He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "What would you say if I told you that in 6 months you could be the general manager of the finest community restaurant in 3 states? 6 months later. Julia stood in the newly renovated dining room, now proudly named Julia's Table. Her son, Michael, carefully arranged fresh flowers on each table. The transformation was breathtaking. Warm lighting, local artwork, and a cozy garden outside, complete with Michael's painting on the wall. But the true change ran deeper. Every employee now earned a living wage and health care. The staff included single mothers, retired teachers, and teenagers saving for college through the restaurant's education fund. Julia had discovered her natural gift for leading and inspiring others, skills David had seen in her long before she did. Tony stayed on as head cook and part owner, his traditional recipes now paired with community-inspired specials. Julia's Table had become exactly what David envisioned, a place not just for food, but for connection. The wall of kindness near the entrance overflowed with thank you notes and pay it forward meal cards. David still stopped by regularly, sitting at the counter to chat about new expansion plans. 3 other towns had already asked about opening their own Julia's table. As Julia watched Michael seat an elderly couple by the window, she thought back to that cold night behind the diner, the night she felt invisible. One person's choice to see her had changed everything. Frank never returned, but Julia hoped he had learned something too. Resentment was too heavy a burden when there was so much joy in building something beautiful. David appeared beside her, holding 2 coffees. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. "Just thinking how everything can change in a single moment," Julia said. "How one person's kindness can ripple further than they'll ever know." "That's what you do every day," David replied. "You create those ripples." If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe for more tales of ordinary people creating extraordinary change. Thank you for joining us on Julia's journey. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply see each other.